The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome into it. It's Thursday. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark in, and plenty to talk about schedule-wise for the Big Red as the schedule drop ongoing as we kick the show off with BTN. But the names are out for Nebraska for 2024-2025. A great man through most of his career, got to spend the first day of the year at the Rose Bowl. That man was Keith Jackson, and one of his catchphrases was, "Whoa, Nelly." Whoa, Nelly. What's your gut reaction as a Nebraska fan with this schedule drop? Celebration? Intrigue? Or, oh, no? Guys, I remember the 2021 schedule for Nebraska football and how daunting it was, and the record was the record. It was a 3-9 season, but it was an entertaining and miserable 3-9 season with all those almosts. You look at Nebraska. I got to stand up and give a round of applause to the Big Ten guys because they did not tiptoe in. They went big. They said, let's swing out of our shoes. Let's try and clear the dry creek. Let's clear it and get onto the green. I mean, they went big, and they should with the properties they now have, the existing properties in the Big Ten, the Michigans, the Ohio States, the Penn States, the Nebraskas, the Wisconsins, Iowas, and then what you're getting in UCLA and USC. Numbers to get in today can do so 489-1240, 489-1240, and can also email chris@hailvarsity.com. But I'm celebrating. I'm absolutely celebrating because I look at this beer being half full as an opportunity. I look at this daunting schedule for Nebraska, specifically in 2025. You hire Matt Rule because he will and wants to embrace this type of challenge. And it's absolutely up Trev Albert's alley. If you go back to his last appearance on the network, he said Nebraska played and made their reputation time in, time out, playing primetime games. Nebraska has one protected rival. That is Iowa, and that opens the gates for a lot of primetime opponents. Nebraska is still a helmet game, despite their last 6 seasons. Why not get up to speed? That's first and foremost of importance. But get good, get competitive, and let's see how it plays out. The Big Ten is going to, at minimum, get your first place in your conference runner-up in. And with this strength of schedule, they're making the Blue Bloods do the Blue Blood shuffle here against one another. They're going to get 3, possibly a 4th, because everyone in this thing is going to have 3 losses. Maybe not your SEC champ, but your Big Ten champ could get a little grace, I would think, because of the strength of schedule component. And I think that's very real, very wise. And it's not locked in stone for 20 years. It's just a 2-year trial window, and then you can reassess after a couple of years.
But what I'm seeing here is, like, everyone in the Big Ten has to earn it. Like, the first reaction for Husker fans is like, oh, man, 2025 is brutal. And then you start looking at some other teams, some other schedules, and you say, no one's got it easy.
It's a death march for everybody.
It's a death march for everybody. And this is conference expansion for you. This is what the Big Ten wants. You have to earn those TV media rights dollars. You want to make the big bucks from NBC, CBS, and Fox? Well, you got to play the big boys. It's as simple as that. So
That's what I want on my TV.
The parity in the conference is going to go up. The competitiveness level in the conference is going to go up. And guess what? We've been talking about the Big Ten potentially expanding further. It's only going to get better and better in terms of your competition. Whoever makes the Big Ten title game is going to have to earn it because we're getting closer and closer to college football. Talked about it for probably 2 years now. We're getting closer and closer to an NFL model. A few years from now.
So this looks like to me.
But by the end of the 2020s, it could be a situation where running the table in college football is almost as hard as running it in the NFL. That's how difficult this may become with just, you look at Nebraska in 2025 has USC and Ohio State on the road. And let's not forget UCLA, Michigan, and Iowa at home. Like, that's a tough schedule for 2025, and that's going to become the standard for Nebraska moving forward. It could be that somewhere down the road, 11-1 in the Big Ten is the best record out there. It's going to become more and more challenging. We're going to get closer and closer to the NFL where, you know what, the regular season's about TV rights. People are going to tune in. If you drop one, it's okay because you're still going to make the college football playoff.
We're not going to see an 11-1. I highly doubt.
It would be difficult, but that's how it should be because you want to talk about making running the table that much harder. Think about in the past, honestly, decade or so many college football fans and Big Ten fans in particular have had this conversation about the East Division is so much better than the West Division. And you have West Division teams making it into the Big Ten Championship with an 8-4 record because that West Division is not very good. But now you throw everybody together, and now you get the Big Ten that everybody wants to see. And now you get more helmet games out of it. You get to see, say, Ohio State, Nebraska. You get to see Penn State, Nebraska more often. You get to see USC and Ohio State more often. This is good for the conference, and it's good just for overall viewing pleasure as a fan of college football. And as you said, Schmidt, I mean, that's what you want to see on your TV, right? And that makes it even more impressive to make, and I get it, it's going to be an expanded playoff, but that makes it harder to make it anyway, and it makes it that much more impressive when you do make that field.
And Connor, you and I talked last week. What's that push that the SEC is going to need to get to 9? We might be seeing it right here with these schedules because ABC/ESPN is going to look at the SEC and say, look at what Fox, CBS, and NBC got week in, week out.
Get crushed in ratings because you're making us
air
Alabama game.
Louisiana Lafayette's going to Tuscaloosa.
This might be the push the SEC needs to get ESPN behind him saying, hey, you need to add a 9th because we're getting killed by NBC, CBS, and Fox right now with what the Big Ten has.
Look at the entree. Am I overpaying for a tough steak or am I paying an exorbitant amount for a great meal? And listen, to your point about the Big Ten West never winning a Big Ten championship, I would say the Big Ten West has been tough, rugged, physical, not always good, or at least elite. Even in the one-off all those years in Indy. You've had some good ball games of Sparty and Iowa, right? But for the most part, it's been Ohio State bludgeoning some poor team from the West. The best showing, quite honestly, when Ohio State's been in there was Northwestern about 3 years ago, where that was a struggle. But
the Big Ten West, to your point, has been the definition of parity. Like
it's been tough.
Not ODY, RTY, parity.
Right.
But it's been middling parity because you go up against the Big Ten East and you realize who the big dogs really are. But the Big Ten West has been competitive.
And this is the issue that I have too. And I get it. The Big Ten West has been tough. And, I've grown up rooting for a team that's in the West. Nebraska has been in the West. But they don't have potentially 2 to 3 college football playoff contenders like the East has had for the past 5-6 years. So I think that needs to get balanced out more. And obviously you get rid of the divisions and that helps that out quite a bit. Now it makes it a lot harder to be at the top because, again, an 8-4 West Division champ, that probably puts you at like 5 or 6 in the league now. And that's how it should be because how many times have you heard Big Ten fans complain about Ohio State going to play, say, 8-4 Northwestern? And I love my Northwestern Wildcats, but like, come on here. They're going to play 8-4 Northwestern while 11-1 Michigan or 11-1 Penn State is watching the game at home. Like that's not how it should be.
Division. Yeah.
That is not how it should be. And I'm glad that that's going to get, I guess, fixed. And it'll make for a more entertaining Big Ten championship game because, again, the Big Ten is a premier conference in college football. That's how it should be.
No off weeks. We've said that a lot. We've learned that the hard way, some of us, from the Big Ten years, and now it's really going to get difficult. Let's lay it out for you. We don't have dates, we don't have kickoff times, but we do have opponents, and maybe you've seen this on social media, and we'll spend a lot of time on this today. Brandon Vogel going to join us in 10 minutes from Hail Varsity. Jeremiah Sirles, our favorite Husker offensive lineman, NFL vet, he'll be with us at 5. And then Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch going to join us. He was down in Texas with Coach Rule in the satellite camp as he was covering that with Rule and 7 of his assistants down there. So we'll get Mitch's take on that. But also, Mitch will sound off for sure on what's ahead for Nebraska with the new Big Ten schedule in 2024 and 2025. But what we have is this for Nebraska. Their home slate is Indiana, Sparty, Minnesota, Wisconsin. Those are the home games. That's not the non-conference. We'll get that to you in a little bit, the full schedule. But the rest of the Big Ten, this is your road schedule for 2024. Pack alcohol and your tailgate needs appropriately at Iowa, at Northwestern, at Penn State, at Purdue, at UCLA. And I love that Nebraska has been paired with UCLA to get west. Nebraska has a lot of really strong recruiting ties in Texas. Nebraska has a lot of strong recruiting ties to the east with Barthol and Coach Foley, and of course Coach Rule being from the east. Go explore the West. Go hit the West, because Nebraska's hit the West at a really high level through a lot of their existence. And UCLA just makes sense. You did home and home with the Bruins in the 70s. You did 2 different home and homes in the 80s, 83, 84, 87, 88. You saw them 93, 94. And then you also saw him in the 2000s when Jim Mora was there. And then you also got him in the Foster Farms Bowl. So you've got an extensive history, more so with UCLA than you do USC.
You guys ready for the most legendary 21-hour road trip of all time?
Are you
Lincoln,
proposing?
UCLA? Well, it's. I don't think it's a very bold prediction. Whenever you look at UCLA's home schedule, and let's be honest, look at how Nebraska opened their Big Ten slate back in 2011. It was at Wisconsin, their first game in the Big Ten, and you come back home and it's home against Ohio State. They're going to make sure that UCLA and USC have helmet games in week 1. You can sell it. You can put a game on Fox on Big Noon Kickoff or 2:30 on CBS, and then you can put a night game on NBC. It makes way too much sense to have Nebraska travel to UCLA for a 2:30 kick week 1 of 2024. Makes way too much sense because UCLA, when you compare them to where USC is at right now, they're the little brother. So you want them to have a competitive matchup. You're not going to go give them, let's see who's on their home slate. Ohio State, you're not going to give them week 1. Nebraska, whenever you just look at their home slate, makes a lot of sense. I don't think you send them at Michigan week 1 either. No. So I think you give UCLA, Nebraska at home week 1. You can put it on national television. It's the welcome to the Big Ten. And you have the nightcap, USC at Penn State. It makes way too much sense for that to not be what's going to go down. I mean, that's my bold prediction of the day. Nebraska will be playing UCLA week 1 in Los Angeles. I think that is, I'd take that to the bank.
Hold on, I'm gonna amend that. Okay. They deserve a fraternity style hazing / paddling. Make them each go on the road. Make them go to Penn State. Make UCLA come to Lincoln. You can do a night game. You can do a August 31st kickoff Thursday. I mean, they're on the quarter system out on the West Coast anyway, so they're not in school till, I don't know, hell, October. So,
well, if you're going to host them, do you put UCLA on the road against Michigan?
Well, do
week 1?
Give them. Let's just get it inked right now. Let Nebraska host UCLA to kick off the season like they're doing with Minnesota this year.
Well, that's what I think they should do. But I look at it being a road game based on the schedule, and I go, it makes way too much sense.
Elements too, right? I mean, I get it, putting them like, hey, welcome to the Big Ten, but
put UCLA on the road against Michigan in November. There's your welcome to the Big Ten game.
You're going to have, for the first time in the history of college football, coaches saying, yeah, we'll head out to the West Coast in November. Sure.
Hey.
We'll do a little vacation.
4-hour flights and nothing.
Yeah, big deal. But no, I think you're right. I think you get one of your blue bloods to host USC, one of your blue bloods to host UCLA, but I don't think they should get to host.
I don't think they should. I think from a TV dollars and from a welcome the LA to the Big Ten type setup, you're going to have a week one game in LA.
Let the buzz happen in the number one market.
Yeah. You send one of those two California teams away from home. You let one of the California teams stay at home based on the schedule sets up.
Flip it around.
I think USC is going to be playing at Penn State week 1 in 2024, probably a night game. And the Nebraska UCLA, probably that 2:30 window on CBS in LA.
Every Rose Bowl in the 1980s felt like it was USC, Michigan.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you get. You want to go super nostalgia 40 to 50 years ago, it's Ohio State, USC, and the Rose Bowl. Back to Nebraska, their schedule on the road for 2024 at Iowa, at Northwestern, at Penn State, at Purdue, at UCLA. 2025 for Nebraska. Their home schedule, grab a Tums, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, UCLA, Rutgers. The road schedule for 2025 for Nebraska, Maryland, crab cakes and football, the Fighting Flex of Minnesota, at Ohio State, or the Ohio State, at USC. I still remember that game, and it's been 100 years ago, but you're out at USC during the Callahan era, the Saturday night showcase in 2007 when USC came to Lincoln. But it had been forever since they played one another. It had been the 1970s.
And there's two ways to me that 2025 schedule can go.
Good or terrible.
Either Matt Rule gets it rolling and Nebraska fans are excited by the schedule, or it's going to be the season that puts Matt Rule in the hot seat in year 3. That's the two ways it goes.
I think they build up and they're competitive. You survive that schedule with 7 or 8 wins. Wow. Brandon Vogel's with us next on Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity Radio. Reaction to the Big Ten schedule drop. We bring in managing editor with Hail Varsity, Brandon Vogel, at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. Vogues, gut says what, my man? Wow or whoa?
My gut says first and foremost that apparently this new scheduling model is called Flex Protect Plus, which is objectively hilarious. I think I have a can of Flex Protect Plus still in my garage that I bought off the TV at 2 a.m. Used it to build a chicken wire boat that I needed to seal up. So I'm glad that can help the Big Ten schedule in a time where you've got 16 teams. You've got a conference that spans from New Jersey to the Missouri River. Then it goes down the pipe into a warp zone, pops up in California. Like, there's no good way to do this, right? So I guess this is the way to go. I'm not down on it. It creates a ton of great games, which I think is going to have a massive impact on Big Ten football, but college football at large, because this is kind of coming for everybody eventually.
It is, and you look at Nebraska, where they're at right now, what they need to do year one, but more importantly, the momentum factor we seem to talk about quite often as getting up to speed, not just getting your ducks in a row for year one, but the storm clouds ahead, not just for Nebraska, but for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at this from I guess a new Nebraska regime perspective, like the road to getting Nebraska to where I think Husker fans, even just college football fans in general, kind of expect Nebraska to be, it didn't get shorter today. Like, and that's the difference between a division format versus, I guess, what we can call an open format. Now, if you want to play for a conference title, you got to be one of the 2 best teams. Previously, and this is even true in the Big 12 North to a degree, like you could get there by being the 3rd or 4th best team, and that's off the table now. And just kind of from an objective standpoint, because Nebraska was in the half where you could get there as being the 3rd or 4th best team, it makes things tougher, but doesn't make things better, because like who wants to kind of sneak into those championship games if that's how you're getting there?
Brandon Vogel's with us here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. And Brandon, I like the analogy you used to start off with Flex Protect Plus. Everyone remembers that commercial where the guy builds the boat with a screen door on the bottom of his boat and uses
seals it up.
Yeah, I'm not going to use the brand name. I'm not getting sued here on a Thursday afternoon, but everyone remembers that commercial. I like the reference. How quickly could Nebraska's 2025 season turn into a boat that was built with a screen door at the bottom where you're just taking on water and slowly sinking? It really feels like Matt Rule needs to get some momentum going before 2025 because that season could be long with how it shapes up.
Yeah, it's a tough one. You got both USC and Ohio State on the schedule, and that's just how some of these are going to be. It's interesting how they chose to protect rivalries in this instance because we know that matters a lot to the Big Ten. It's always mattered a lot, but Ohio State ends up with only one. Ohio State plays for a rivalry trophy against Illinois, but I guess that wasn't worth protecting. Penn State ends up with none. Like, I honestly, from just an entertainment perspective, almost hope Nebraska ended up as the team that had no rivals because, it's kind of reflective of, I think, where Nebraska is really at. But it's good to have that Iowa game, at least as one thing you can count on. But those teams that get basically 3 protected games, probably a little bit of an advantage in terms of, well, at least we know, like if you're Iowa, you're going to play Wisconsin, you're going to play Minnesota, you're going to play Nebraska every year. Penn State doesn't know anybody. I mean, they'll know in advance, but it's interesting to flex that piece of it, I guess. But in terms of getting back to your actual question, Elijah, sorry, I got sidetracked there. There's so much to kind of consume from what we just learned a little over an hour ago. That 2025 season becomes pretty important. I think it makes 2023, which was already important, even more important because this is your last kind of divisional setup. You're going to want to show some progress because the strength of schedule isn't getting easier just by nature. Like, you're adding UCLA and USC, which regardless of where they may fall right now or 2 years from now, are programs that enter, like Nebraska did, though it hasn't been there for much of the past decade, not at the middle of the conference or at the bottom, but like in the upper third of it.
I mean, to your point, Brandon, 2023 looks like with conference expansion we can expect continuing over the coming years. 2023 looks like the last time Nebraska is going to have a schedule like this because 2025 is going to become the standard as opposed to the exception to the rule.
Yeah, I think that's right. And kind of tying into the protected rival piece of it, like you're the most other than Penn State, but similar to Ohio State, which only has the Michigan protected. You're kind of the most flexible, one of the most flexible units in this entire conference scheme. So some years that'll go well for you. Some years it probably won't.
Brandon Vogel's with us on Hail Varsity Radio, and we were talking about strength of schedule just overall in the Big Ten now moving forward. And with the expanded playoff and the best 2 teams in the conference making the Big Ten championship, where does that leave the third-place team in the Big Ten? Does that give them any playoff hope whatsoever? Because you already got to consider the loser of the Big Ten championship game. But I feel like that could play out in a lot of interesting scenarios with now the tougher and newly expanded Big Ten.
Yeah, what I'm thinking will happen is your top 2 teams in the Big Ten, barring some extraordinary circumstances, will be in every year. Maybe every 2 years you get a third team in. So I would expect over a long enough span for the Big Ten to average 2.5 teams in the playoff. And I think that's where you'll be. A schedule like this, not just Nebraska's, but for anyone, I think can help you with that. If the SEC, eventually gets to something similar by adding a 9th game, which feels inevitable, even though they decided not to do it right now. The SEC, I think, will be probably an average of 2.5 teams, maybe even 2.67, maybe even a little higher. They might have a better bet to get that third team in more consistently. And then we'll see what happens from there. I mean, we are really in, as college football looks right now, which can change quickly. The SEC and Big Ten just kind of stand head and shoulders above the rest of them, based on size, but also based on the programs that are in those conferences.
So, Vogues, does Does 10-3 become your new 12-0?
I think so. I mean, that's kind of exactly what I was talking about or thinking about when I mentioned early on in this segment. Like, this is really going to change what college football is. For a long time, you had people who argued against a playoff, basically, or an expansion of the playoff. Like, it's happened in increments where the qualm has been, we don't want to value the regular season because up until 10, 15 years ago, probably, like, the expectation was if you want for a national title, you got to go undefeated. That's no longer the case in a 4-team playoff era. It's going to be even less the case in a 12-team playoff era. So are we ready to get used to it, get used to being like, hey, 9-3, you're still a really good football team, depending on where you played and who you played. And where you played and who you played isn't going to be a question in the SEC and the Big Ten. That's their key advantage.
What the Big Ten's done beautifully here, guys, is they have kept the devaluation out of the discussion with this scheduling setup. I mean, you're having 1 to 2 to 3 monster matchups every weekend, even either your traditional Big Ten matchups or familiar Big Ten matchups. And then you sprinkle in the newbies and the amount of blue blood helmet games you have. You're going to have 1 a weekend or 2 a weekend. So it's going to attract a boatload of attention as everyone strives to be the final 2 standing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you saw with the new commissioner coming from his background, but also with the options the Big Ten has on TV, like, they made this model with TV in mind, which makes sense. I mean, that's where college football has been on a one-way track to TV controlling ever more and more of the sport. And here it is. Like, this creates a ton of great programming options. I mean, you look at, Nebraska's in kind of an interesting spot. It's still one of the relative new guys. I think Penn State still is, and they joined the conference in the early 90s. Random fact, but fun fact, Nebraska's played UCLA more times than it's played 6 Big Ten teams after being in the conference for a decade. It's played UCLA more than it's played Ohio State or Michigan. So, those Nebraska UCLA matchups, at least, I think resonate a little bit with Husker fans and probably with Bruins fans. But that's where college football is at, where you can add these 2 teams from California. It feels kind of disjointed. It makes sense, but you wonder how it all fits together. And then you look at it they added Nebraska a decade ago, and Nebraska's already pretty used to playing UCLA, relatively speaking.
Brendan, 90 seconds here. Does it not feel like with conferences continuing to expand? I mean, we're going to reach a point where with 9 conference games, you only be playing half the conference in any given year, assuming expansion continues. Do you see expansion to the college football season where it's not going to be 10-2 as your new 12-0, it's going to be 12-2?
No, I think that's probably the last hurdle to clear, because when we see some of these rule changes that come along each year, which I tend often to not be in favor of just personally, it's all about shortening the game. We talked recently on one of the shows about overtime and how that's come about. Guys can't play as many plays. I think there is real resistance to expanding the schedule significantly beyond what they've already done with 12-team playoff. So I'd be surprised to see that. But again, if it comes down to a matter of TV and is there a little bit more money at the end of the rainbow if we do it that way, that has a tendency to win.
Brandon Vogel with us, and you can find him on Twitter at Brandon L. Vogel. Read him with HailVarsity.com and magazine. Vogues will get caught up this weekend. Thanks for a few minutes today.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
There he is. Good stuff from Brandon. Can catch the interview if you just caught part of it. Podcast where you go, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and yes, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel can watch the show on video, many different ways. Hail Varsity YouTube, Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio is where you follow, and Facebook on KFOR and KFOR Sports Twitter. Thoughts here on the 366.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Big thanks to Brandon Vogel. We'll spend time with Jeremiah Sirles in about 20 minutes, get his take, as he got to see kind of the best of both worlds, a lot of those Big 12 rivalry games, and then, oh yeah, here's the Big 10, and here's the wood chipper. I mean the schedule that is how things opened for Nebraska, and the UCLA and USC are getting some of that treatment as well. Just real quick, for 2024-2025, that 3-6-6 we talk about, 3 teams are protected. And I kind of thought that Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska would, in some form or fashion, be safe, okay? And the Big Ten prioritized protecting their who's who rivals. I mean, their big dog rivals. And so you're going to get Iowa against Minnesota, against Wisconsin. Nebraska's only going to be protected with Iowa, which we love. We love the Black Friday showdown. It's continued to grow. But Nebraska also is going to have Iowa, UCLA, Minnesota. Those are the 3 teams that they're going to see. Vogue's laid out perfectly. We've touched on it, too, in the first part of this hour, just what Nebraska's history is with UCLA. I halfway thought Northwestern would be that team. But, hey, they've always been pretty tight, pretty close ball games with Minnesota. That's someone you're trying to catch right now if you're Nebraska. If you can be Minnesota, I didn't think I'd ever say that in my life, but it is what it is. If you can get to Minnesota's level, development, tough, good, sound, then you're right there. But you asked a question, Elijah, and let's chew on this. Does the regular season expand? At some point, we've seen the geography expand, and that is still something that could happen if we're talking about the Big Ten absorbing a Carolina, a Virginia, an Oregon, a Washington, maybe a Stanford, someday a Notre Dame. Who knows? But that's what's next. What's next is more addition.
I mean, the Big Ten will be at 20 teams. I don't think it's a bold prediction to say they'll be at 20 teams by 2030.
Sure, you get to 20 because that's the next round. That's the next mile marker. So, do you just expand the regular season and expand the playoff again? You're going to have folks screaming about, well, health and safety, and I totally get it. I mean, it's brutal on your body, but there's so much TV money that talks. And if you do it right, you have NIL money, so the players are compensated. It's an NFL model. The NFL just bumped to 17 games. I'm not saying you do that in college, but is 12 enough? Do you go to 14, especially if you add some other big dogs to the conference? You want to see Nebraska, Notre Dame. You already have USC, Notre Dame. You're going to get Nebraska, USC. You're going to continue to get Nebraska, Ohio State, Michigan. Nebraska's job is to be able to beat some of the teams, Iowa, Minnesota, beat Wisconsin again sometime, please, and take care of the Minnesotas and Northwesterns, teams you're supposed to be better than that you haven't been, and now you're accelerating into this 400 level math class when some of us haven't gotten out of geometry.
Well, eventually you're going to be at a point where there's 20 teams in the Big Ten and you're still stuck at 9 conference games. There's more of the conference that you're not playing every single year than you are playing. Whenever the TV partners look at that, they're going to say, let's go to 11 games. Let's go to 12 games. 12 conference games. We're going to go, you could even say, we're going to go 13 conference games. You get your 1 warm-up game, you get your 1 non-conference game, but the conference games are where we make our money. That's what we're going to go with. And if you're playing 13 conference games in a year, let's just throw that out there as an example, your room for error grows.
Sure.
If you're 11-2 in 13 conference games, that's going to be a phenomenal season come 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. If that does happen. I don't think it's going to be sustainable to remain at 12. You can argue about the health and safety of the players all day long. That's what they did in the NFL. There comes a point where eventually the money that's coming from the TV partners to increase your schedule is just going to be too much to ignore. Where you're going to say, athletes, I know we don't want to put you in further risk of injury.
But here's more NIL money.
You're going to be there with the NFL 3 years from now. You're going to be playing 17 games plus 4 playoff games. We're getting there.
Yeah, but you got to get there.
So where's the point where college football says, what's the difference between 12 and 14 whenever these guys are going to be playing in a 17-game NFL schedule come 2 years from now?
We're just getting you ready, son.
We're just getting you ready, son. And guess what? We're going to cash in on an extra $100 million a year.
I don't know. I
don't want the non-con to go away. I want Nebraska to be able to play Colorado. I want Nebraska to be able to play Tennessee. That's coming up. Nebraska, Oklahoma's on the horizon. I want, if they've not been absorbed by the Big Ten and they're in another Power 5 league, great, but I still want to see a non-conference game. I'd rather see a non-conference game. I'd rather see Nebraska, Colorado, Nebraska, Tennessee, Nebraska pick somebody than seeing Nebraska take on a Purdue or Maryland. Honestly.
Well, soon I think your non-conference slate is going to be the teams from the Big Ten and the SEC, and their non-conference slate are now playing the Big 12 and ACC teams as opposed to playing Mountain West teams and AAC teams and Sun Belt teams. Like, that's just where college football is moving, that it's going to be more like the NFL where there's going to be no off weeks. Your non-conference is a school from the Big 12 or is a school from the ACC, and soon that's not going to be the same level as the Big 10 and the SEC.
It's going to be harder.
It's still going to be a real matchup.
It's going to be harder to schedule a win against, let's bring in a Washington State versus a
Southeastern
Troy,
Louisiana State. Yeah.
Let's bring in a losable game. Let's do a losable pay game. No, thank you.
Well, here's my issue with the expanded schedule. And if you keep expanding the schedule and you keep expanding the playoff, you see guys sit out bowl games. If you keep expanding the playoff, say you expand it to 20 teams, maybe even more than that, do you think the last seed or the last couple of seeds, say a quarterback or a running back, are they going to play? Because, again, I get it. You're getting prepared for the NFL by playing more games. You also got to get there first, right? And with, more, I get it. It's more room for error, more room for improvement, more all this. And that's great.
Better,
more
right?
teams. It's also more room for injury before you even get to the NFL. And I think, look, fans are going to argue for that. I think players are going to argue for that pretty hard, and especially the guys who have sat out bowl games. I mean, what's his face, the Ole Miss QB? I get it wasn't a playoff game, but it would be now, or I guess next year.
I think that's the difference, though. If it is a playoff game,
right?
There's more riding on it. There's better stage.
But if you're the 24th seed in a 24-team playoff,
but at least you still have a fighting chance. That'd be my pep talk if I'm the coach.
Right.
Versus, this is the Gator Bowl. God love you. Great watch. Wonderful gear. Nice swag they gave you. Doesn't matter. If you're in the playoff, it matters. You're not going to have kids. I don't think you're going to have kids sitting out.
I hope
of
not.
The playoffs.
Well, at what point do you expand the regular season and do away with some of the trash bowl games between 6 and 6 teams, the Bahamas Bowl that nobody cares about?
You shift it to optional and teams that aren't playoff. There's still good teams that won't make the playoff. How many? Mm-hmm. How many good teams just missed that cut line?
I think the bowl game roster is going to get cut. Everything we know about college football is it's moving closer and closer to an NFL model. In the NFL, it's either the playoffs or you go home. Mm-hmm. And I think someday college football, it's going to be the same. Either you make the college football playoff or you go home.
How big can you make it, though? Because the pool of teams obviously is so much bigger. But, again, the quality of team obviously isn't 300 or whatever, how many D1 teams there are.
The NFL's at 14.
Yep, 7 each, and they just added to that.
If you're following an NFL model, that's what I look at.
We'll wind down hour one as it is the scheduled drop day for the Big Ten. Hail Varsity Radio continues.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Winding down hour one, it's Hail Varsity Radio presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Quick reminder about your friends at Dyer Law and a congratulations to Dyer Law as the team took fight in front of a federal jury last week in Omaha. After days of testimony, the jury awarded their client $3 million in damages, which is huge. You can trust in the team at Dyer Law to help ensure that your rights are protected and you get the settlement you deserve. Call Dyer Law today, 402-393-7529, or visit Dyer.law to chat with a trusted professional about your claim. That's Dyer.law, Dyer.law, 402-393-7529. Guys, a lot on the schedule as it's dropped. Sirles coming up here in about 10 minutes. Jeremiah Sirles, former Husker NFLer. So we'll get his take on things there. But just about the right amount of welcome to the Big Ten. How do you guys look and see at USC and UCLA's baptism here coming up in 2024?
Look at USC first and foremost. Their 2024 schedule. At home, they have Iowa, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I look at those three rough, tumble, traditional Big Ten teams. They're going to beat you with offensive line. We don't know what Wisconsin's going to look like under Fickell.
A lot of Utah blueprint.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
How'd that go? 0-3 a year ago?
And to be fair, we don't know exactly what Fickell's going to look like in year two. But I look at that home schedule. That's three teams that can come in there and beat you up. And then you're on the road. Penn State and UCLA in addition to Purdue, Northwestern, and Maryland. So USC gets a welcome to the Big Ten, especially with their home schedule. You look at UCLA, they're at home year one, Minnesota, Nebraska, Ohio State, and USC. Ooh. And now that's assuming that Matt Rule gets Nebraska to a place that they haven't been over the past couple seasons. But Minnesota, Nebraska, Ohio State, USC. You also have Northwestern on that home slate for UCLA. And then on the road, Iowa and Michigan in addition to Indiana and Rutgers. So USC and UCLA in 2024, they're going to have to earn it.
It depends on where you get them in the calendar year, too. Like, say Nebraska takes a step forward and then USC's got to come to Memorial in the first week of November, and it's 28 and sleeting outside, and of course it's going to be windy because when isn't it? So, I mean, it depends on where you get them in the schedule in the calendar year too. Depending, like, even if you're a really good team or you're a 6-6 team, I mean, that's big advantage.
Well, how do you stack these? I mean, November has been a big focal point for us the last few years because of how you've ended. You've always had to end as you're limping into the home stretch with Wisconsin, with Iowa, with Minnesota.
And then you throw in either Michigan or Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, that's your Final Four, Final Five. You got to spread it out a little bit, and consecutively, you keep stacking these things. I mean, you better be deep and you better be physical. Todd, Common Sense Todd, emails in, Chris at HailVarsity.com. Nebraska should embrace and appreciate any game they can get in the Rose Bowl that they don't have to earn. Again, thanks, Common Sense.
I agree, Todd.
Todd, thanks for using a period, a comma, and a second period.
Well, that brings me to another thought. Do we think the likes of Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State are going to be mad about playing night games in November if it's in Los Angeles?
No, they'll change their tune immediately.
That's funny. Do we think USC and UCLA are going to put their foot down on November night games in the Rust Belt or in Nebraska? That'll be interesting to see.
They will not like it.
Because I can't wait to see that.
USC better bone up on being physical. Jeremiah Sirles, great Husker, longtime NFLer, his thoughts on the schedule and his playing days on those road trips.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you, Tower 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency, our favorite Husker offensive lineman, NFLer. Jeremiah Sirles back with us. He's in his, dare I say, Husker dungeon. Can find him on Twitter at Sirles71_HSKR. Sirles, how the heck have you been? Hold on a minute. You're muted.
Oh, am I muted?
No, you're good now. You're fine. Yes.
Hello. Busy. I have been busy. 3 kids tends to do that to a person. But, just also grinding with the business, getting guys settled agency-wise. Feel like summer's already starting to fly by. Mm-hmm. But, it's been really good. Kids are good, mama's good, so hard to complain.
Good for you. So I'm all sorts of anxious to ask you about your experiences in the Big Ten and then also against the UCLAs. The schedule drop happened today with the Big Ten as UCLA and USC are coming to the Big Ten here for 2024, 2025, and beyond. And Nebraska's only protected rival is Iowa. What do you think of this schedule? And how did you approach it because your guys' schedules, I mean, you guys got baptism by fire immediately into the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's very similar. I mean, the 2025 schedule seems hold on to your butts-ish, little Samuel L. Jackson, Jurassic Parky, But, I mean, overall, I mean, the Big Ten is going to be the most competitive conference in college football. I mean, I don't really think there's going to be any team that's going to be looking there going, oh, we have an easy schedule this year. You're going to have guys across the board that are just going to be college football contenders, top 10 teams. I mean, it's going to be a meat grinder every single year. I mean, it's going to be a little bit of cannibalism, too. I mean, it's going to be one of those things where we're going to eat each other up, where we might have teams that all have one loss because everyone at one point or another had to drop one. It's going to be really tough. And I mean, Nebraska's definitely got a tough road to hoe here. We got to make the most out of some recruiting, some wins this year.
Jeremiah Sirles with us here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Sirles talking Nebraska's new 2024-2025 schedule, what that means moving forward. And Sirles, Nebraska was, as we kind of laid out, welcome to the Big Ten in 2011. It was at Wisconsin and then home against Ohio State. We kind of see the same with USC and UCLA this year. I particularly look at USC, their home schedule, a lot of rough and tumble, physical Big Ten football teams. But do you think that teams should be welcome to the Big Ten that way? You can see it from a TV rights point of view. You want to get these helmet matchups, USC against your Penn States and Michigans and Ohio States of the world, but what is your reaction to that? The fact that you're going to take these schools and really put them through the gauntlet early?
You have to, right? I mean, it's anytime you walk into a new room or you walk into a new weight room or whatever, like everyone's going to start eyeing around thinking, who can I take? Who's the guy here that I can pick on? Who's the one to not mess with, right? You don't know that unless you start putting them against each other right away, right? The last thing you want to do is let a team come in, and I think the Big Ten was kind of pissed at us in our second year where we walked in and walked straight to the championship as a second-year team of the Big Ten, kind of like, oh, little brother thinks he's here to play. Granted, it didn't work out so well for us. But you know what I mean? Like, they don't want that to happen. They want, as a conference, you want to be like, all right, you think you can come play with the big dogs? All right, let's see if you can play with the big dogs from the rip, right? And it can work really well if they have struggle. But, I mean, we did a nice job in our second year of being able to knock teams off, do our thing, and make our way to the championship game. But you don't ever want to just let the new guys in town come in and not just pick on them a little bit.
Jeremiah Sirles is with us on Hail Varsity Radio. And when you get rid of the divisions heading into this year, are you a fan of that? Because now you really get the two best teams in the conference. We talked about it earlier in the show. The West Division the past couple of years has just kind of been pure madness, but you don't really get that second best team. So are you a fan of that? And could you see the Big Ten getting 3, maybe even 4, if I'm really being crazy, playoff teams?
I think three is very likely with that schedule. I mean, I think it'd have to be kind of the stars align type of thing. But I am a fan of the no conferences. I'm going to be sad that you're going to miss a little bit of the rivalry that you're going to see every single year in and year out. I think some of there were some good ones getting created. But overall, there's going to be new rivalries. I mean, right? There's going to be new ones that we're excited to see, and there's going to be buildups of it's going to take 2 years again before they play each other type of things. And I think it's going to be good for the conference overall. It'll make it a lot more fair. I think it'll be a lot more matched. I mean, honestly, if you had a dominant team on the East the last 2 years, you knew you had a cakewalk way towards the championship game. You were going to go through the gauntlet on the West, but now, like I said, you start throwing everyone's name into the pot and you throw all those teams, like it's just going to make it overall more competitive. And honestly, as a fan, since I'm not playing anymore, way more fun to watch.
Yeah, Sirles, you just hit on something I wanted to go next. You're not playing anymore, but you did. You played at a very high level. And something we discussed back in hour one was whether or not this is going to lead to eventual schedule expansion for college football, that you're going to be playing 14 teams now with conferences expanding. You need to share the love. You need the TV rights money. Do you think college football players are at a point right now where their body would be able to handle the rigors of, say, a 14-game regular season?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't. You'd have to scale back spring ball, in my opinion. I think if you're going to add 2 more games, you got to scale back the physicality of what the spring looks like, because that's what the NFL does. The NFL, hey, we added a game. Every NFL team is nowhere near as physical in OTAs as what they were, because it's a long, grueling season, but. Also, preparing guys for the NFL, it's not a bad idea to extend a game. I mean, the rookie wall in the NFL is a very real thing. Like, you see guys hitting, like, late November, early December when they're used to kind of wrapping their season up. It's like, oh, no, buckle up, young boy. We got 5 more of these things, right? Like, this ain't no time to let down. And so, I mean, it's preparation for the NFL. And, I mean, I'm never going to be a complainer for more college football.
Well, Sirles with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Sirles, Iowa is the one protected rival for Nebraska. These first 2 seasons with USC and UCLA, Nebraska will have the way it's set up. It's 3-6-6, where you're going to play the other 6 kind of every couple, but you're good with getting Iowa, you're getting UCLA. If you're Nebraska, you're getting Minnesota. And Nebraska's trying to kind of catch what Minnesota's been doing. That's a consistent program that's at 8 or 9 wins. You're familiar with UCLA, and then there's Iowa. If you had to pick the one protected team, say Trev called you, who would you have picked? Do you like the Iowa choice, or do you kind of fancy Minnesota? Do you like Wisconsin? Who would it have been?
Indiana.
I would have picked a team that we've beaten a few more times, but probably Iowa. I think you do got to protect that. It is the border war. It's turned into a pretty fun thing. Busting with the boys has helped with that too. And there's a lot of momentum behind that game. And the last few years, it's been a meaningful game, right? I mean, the trophy's involved now, and I think it was kind of a forced rivalry early on. But, I mean, us getting that win last year, I feel like really re-sparked it. It's been a kind of a one-sided. You didn't want to let that go. You want to keep that. Fans are involved. There's former players that get involved, right? I mean, we get in spats with George Kittle, and it goes back and forth. Like, there's a lot of involvement in that, where I just don't think there's quite as much investment from the outside between a Nebraska, Minnesota, or a Nebraska, like Wisconsin, as there is with the Iowa teams.
Are you at all sad about losing Wisconsin as a year-in, year-out matchup, though?
I am.
That did have a little bit of tradition to it at this point. Yeah.
But, I mean, here's the thing. Wisconsin's going to be so different. I mean, it's going to be so weird when Wisconsin runs out there for their first play and they're in 10 personnel and there's no fullback or tight end. It's just a bunch of receivers. And, like, it's not going to be the same, And so I just don't think that the old school idea of, like, Nebraska, Wisconsin, it's going to morph into something totally different, because Luke Fickell's going to upheave what has been Wisconsin football for the better part of two decades now, and it's just going to look like an air raid.
Well, we talked about it earlier today, too, with Brandon Vogel in hour 1, and he actually dropped the knowledge on us that Nebraska's seen UCLA more times than 6 other Big Ten schools. So what do you think of Nebraska building on that so-called, I don't want to say rivalry, but it's a matchup that's got a lot of history to it, and obviously I didn't really realize how much history was to that rivalry.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly like Elijah said. That's a helmet game. That's a big helmet game, right? The golden domes versus the iconic whites. Like, that's going to be one of those things that I think people will tune into, even if they're not either one of the fans, just because it's so unique. I loved going out to the Rose Bowl. I thought it was super cool to go play in the Rose Bowl. I go to the Rose Bowl every year. It's where the NFLPA All-Star Game is, so I still go out there, and I still remember playing there. I mean, playing against Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks and some good players out there that they had, and it's just a cool place. So I'm excited that one is going to be kind of re-sparked. And honestly, I think that if we can get UCLA out here in October, November, then I would really like it that way too, because those boys are kind of soft.
the old weather conditions. Yeah. Sirles, I want to switch away from the schedule and kind of piggyback off of a Twitter clip that was out there from your friend Will Compton. You mentioned bussin', and we get a kick out of different anecdotes that's dropped from their podcast. And who was the guy Will was sitting down with? It wasn't the comedians, but it was a Twitter drop. But he just kind of got into just how blunt Carl and Bo were verbally, and was that a Will thing, or was that a everybody thing?
It was an everybody thing. I mean, my favorite Carl Pelini story I tell is I stepped on his foot one time when we were doing
accident.
Drills. It was an accident. He was behind us, right? We were working with the D-line, and Sue pushed me, and I stepped on his foot. I was like, I don't know what you want me to do. But then, the next day, he came up, and he was all humpy. He's like, Sirles, I wanted to find you and come in and shoot you in the chest. My ankle hurts so bad. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then, one time, Carl, he told me one time if I held Sue again, he was going to chop all my fingers off. They were just very blunt people. And it's just that you could respect it because you knew that whatever was coming out of their mouth, that's what was coming. I mean, and there's a few other things we can talk about off air that I can tell stories about that I don't feel like getting canceled, so I won't. But, like, yeah, they're just extremely blunt human beings.
So blame Sue.
Yeah, it's Sue's fault.
For the verbalized attempted murder.
I mean, if you heard it, have I told you guys the Sue Carl story when Sue got the personal foul? I think Will told me. Anyway, Sue gets a personal foul, comes over on the sideline. Bo's freaking out, right? Like, Carl, get him out. I don't want him in there. Da, da, da. And Carl's trying to coach, and Carl literally turns to Bo. He looks at me and goes, Bo, I need him. And then just turned back, and Bo was like, ah! And then just like ran away. Like it was like that's just how it was on the sideline, like all the time. I avoided Bo like the plague on the sideline during game day. You just didn't want to be anywhere.
Was there a code word? Barnett was telling me how he'd have the headset on. McCartney wouldn't wear the headset, and DiNardo would warn him, Ralphie. That was the code word to get the hell away from Mac because he's raging on the sideline. You guys weren't wearing.
I mean, when the
headsets.
hat came off,
that was the signal.
That was like, all right, batten down the hatches. Hide the children. Like it's happening.
Well, when Bo hopped on the Bussin' with the Boys podcast, I think it was about a year ago now. Will asked him, like, do you regret any of the sideline antics? Do you think that could have led to any of the losses? What's your take on that? Do you think that Bo's sideline antics hurt the performance of the team? Because I distinctly think back to that Wisconsin game in the snow when Bo was freaking out on the sideline and Nebraska's letting the game slip away from him on the field.
No, not really, because we just understood that's how much he cared. Right? Like, I would much rather have a coach that's flipping out on the sideline like that than one that's just sitting there holding his microphone, moving it around, looking up in the stands, thinking about his tea time. Like, yeah. I mean, not to name any names, but, like, you know, for me, it's just one of those things that, like, I knew how much Bo cared. I knew how much he cared, how hard he was going to work. And, like, you knew that, like, if he's yelling at you, it's because he wants more out of you.
What would Bo's reaction to the 2025 schedule be?
We're on live radio.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, F them, it's us versus them. I mean, that's how it always was. It didn't matter who we were playing. We could have been playing the Green Bay Packers or the Sisterhood of the Blind, Deaf, and Dumb. It really didn't matter. Like, that was the mentality that was instilled in us is it's about us, it's not about them, and we're going to go out and handle business.
Sirles, what's a fair progress report as we look at this 2023 season? Mm-hmm. Not only the here and now, but the future we've spent a lot of time talking about. You got to get up to speed. You got to get competitive again.
Yeah, I mean, that's number one thing is go win games. I mean, we can talk about how cool the big helmets are and how much fun it can play. Like, we're going to go get waxed. Who cares? Like, we got to get competitive. We got to win football games. We got to go to a bowl game. Like, there's got to be benchmarks to where we're going. And I don't think that it's realistic and fair to Matt Rule to be like, you're going to turn it around in 1 year and we're going to be a 10-win football team. You know, obviously anything can happen, you know, but I want to just see marked improvement on the offense and the defense and the special teams, no turnovers, no dumb penalties. Like, that's how you end up winning 6 games is you don't beat yourself. Mm-hmm. So many times in the last 5-6 years, we've just beat ourselves, and that's what's ended up losing and getting 3 wins and 4 wins. Like, we just clean up some of the mental stuff and self-inflicting wounds. I can easily see this team winning 5-6 games next year.
Jeremiah Sirles with us. Sirles, just a quick update with you and the agency and how you had a number of guys get drafted and also sign deals. How's the offseason as they get ready for camp or they're in camp? How's that progress been with your guys?
It's been great. Yeah, I mean, our center, John Michael Schmidt, went in the second, which was awesome for us. You know, allowed him he's going to get a chance to be the starting center for the New York Giants next year, which is awesome. Adrian Martinez is doing great up in Detroit as he's running with the threes. As Hendon Hooker's coming off that ACL injury, so he's going to have a ton of there. Running back from Northwestern, Evan Hall, went in the 5th to the Colts. He's going to be rotational guy in there. I got another offensive lineman in Detroit. I got a running back and a linebacker down in Miami, and our guys, Austin Allen's in Green Bay. You know, so we got all our guys who got homes right now. You know, we got no one on the street, which is nice. And, you know, now it's a chance for them just to go out there and make a team, and we'll just be rooting along and helping them any way we can.
Sirles, best to you and the fam. Thanks for a few minutes today, bud.
Absolutely. Always good to be on. It's been too long. I'll get back on more, I promise.
Oh, good.
We'll slow down
See
eventually,
bud.
Right?
Yeah, I get you. Take care, man. There you are.
Bye, friends.
Jeremiah Sirles with us, Hail Varsity Radio at Sirles71_HSKR. It's where you follow. We'll spend some time. Mitch Sherman, The Athletic, on the way.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Big thanks to Jeremiah Sirles for joining us. Podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play to download the segment or the whole show. We say hi to Mitch Sherman. He is back from Texas, and it's Mitchapalooza. What's on the grill, Mitch? Your backdrop is beautiful, as folks can see that streaming along the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Good to see you again.
Yeah, just sitting out in the backyard. Nothing on the grill at the moment, but
you're thinking.
That can always change.
Are you cooking anyone on the basketball court behind you?
Yeah, I'll get my 12-year-old out here and I'll cook him up. Not right now though. I'm just all focused on you out here on the patio.
Well, my advice for later, I'm sure you already know it. You're a dad, so every dad's got the hook shot in their locker. But I've never seen a 12-year-old be able to stop a good hook shot.
Oh no, I've got like a foot of height on him at this point. So if I want to go with and it's a left-handed hook too, so even more difficult to defend because he's not used to seeing it.
That's so good. Mitch has got it planned out. Mitch, we'll start with the schedule here and reaction to Nebraska's 2024 and 2025 slate. Wow, this is our take is kind of really impressed at the showcase for Nebraska, but also, are they going to be ready for 2024 and 2025?
Well, I like the way the Big Ten did it. I like Nebraska having the one protected rival, and then I like the way that they're doing the two-play system with the rotating home and homes, and the divisions going away gives the league a lot of freedom to do things differently. And you'll notice that even with two teams coming into the league with UCLA and USC after this season, you have more ability to avoid those long stretches where a school like Nebraska doesn't play Michigan or Penn State for a long period of time. It's great to know that the Huskers are going to play, first of all, every team in the league at least once in the first 2 years. In the case of Iowa, Minnesota, and UCLA, it's both years. And then that really in every 4-year window, they're going to play every team twice. So you're no longer going to see Nebraska, Penn State, or Nebraska, Michigan, or in the case of the new format, the new teams, Nebraska and USC or UCLA, have long periods where it doesn't even feel like they're in the same conference as your team. I like that. And I think it's good for Nebraska and Matt Rule that 2024 and 25 are structured in the order that they are. 25 shapes up as a more daunting schedule because that's the year that Ohio State and Michigan come on. That's the year that USC comes on. None of those three teams are on the 24 schedule. Not that it's easy. You've still got UCLA, you've still got Iowa, you've still got Penn State. But it's more manageable, I would say, for what year 2 might be. And then in year 3, if Rule's got it going the way that he expects to, hopes to, and he hasn't said, hey, look, this is going to be a deal where we're ready to go toe-to-toe with everyone in year 3 or year 4 or whatever it is, or year 2. But, just the way that college football works today and the amount of turnover that you can potentially have and that Nebraska does have going into 23, I would think that by 2025, they feel like they're going to be ready to compete with those teams.
Mitch, is it fair in your opinion that some teams are going to have multiple protected rivalries, some teams are going to have 0? That's the one thing that surprised me about this, that not every team is going to have a protected rivalry matchup. What is your reaction to that?
Yeah, it's just Penn State that has no protected rivalries, but they're still going to have the 2-year setups with 3 teams. Nebraska has the two plays with 2 teams. Iowa's going to have that with no teams. So that kind of balances it out. Really, this is like a hybrid of the 3-6-6 model. And the benefit of the 3-6-6 is, like I said, that you're going to play every team in the league twice in a 4-year period. So even with, you kind of get the best of both worlds, I think, with this Flex Protect Plus, which I thought was like some kind of an investment portfolio option or something like that.
It's an infomercial purchase at 2 a.m. is what Brandon Vogel told us.
That also is well describes the Flex Protect Plus. It's like a device that you put on your back after you get injured swinging a golf club.
That's pretty good.
But what it does is I think it makes it so that it doesn't matter the number of protected rivals you have, it seems to be somewhat equal for all 16 teams. Now, look, people are going to pick this thing apart, and I've already heard it. I've already seen it on social media. I've already heard people talking about it. There's going to be reasons to complain about any model that they put out there. Like, somebody's going to complain that, every team in the league has to play Ohio State twice in a 4-year period except one team. And it's like, well, hey, that's Ohio State. They don't have to play Ohio State. Mm-hmm. So their schedule is going to be easier because, the Buckeyes aren't on there. It's, there is no perfect way to do it. There's no perfect way to do a 32-team schedule when the NFL rolls it out. And if the Big Ten decides to add a couple more teams, when and if the Pac-10, Pac-12 with 10 teams blows up here this summer, then this thing's going to be out the window. And maybe even before these two seasons that were announced today get done. And if you get up to 18 or 20 teams, then the Flex Protect Plus doesn't work the way that it does so smoothly with just 16.
So, Mitch, when you go into 2024 and 25, you get rid of the divisions. Obviously, you add the 2 teams from the West Coast. How much more parity, if any, do you expect to have? Because Michigan and Ohio State have been your traditional powers.
I don't know that college football is moving in the direction of parity in any way. Parity across the board where, the gap is narrowed between an Ohio State and, Northwestern or Rutgers. I don't think we're moving toward that with this model, with the way that college football is working, conference expansion, everything that's changing in the sport and has emerged in the last few years, to me, is piling more into the direction of the opposite of parity. So this, I think, will contribute, or it certainly isn't going to work against the trends that we see, that where the rich are getting richer in the sport. And I don't think that's the focus of the leaders in college football at this point. They're not looking to create parity. This isn't the NFL where you make a schedule model where, you have every year it's based on a formula that is meant to prop up the teams that finished with the lower records. They're looking for that kind of parity in the NFL. That isn't necessarily the motivation in college football. The way that that college football makes money is by Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan and USC and Nebraska, if they're getting their stuff in order to be good, because those are the teams that get TV ratings. Mm-hmm. And that's not really the case in the NFL. They want 32 teams that are ultra competitive.
Mitch Sherman with The Athletic joining us, Hail Varsity Radio at Mitch Sherman on Twitter. That's where you follow him. Mitch, I wanted to get your take on your time in Texas, some observations. How was Dallas and then Houston for Coach Rule and his assistants?
Yeah, I caught up to them in Houston on Tuesday on the second leg of the Texas tour and watched them work at the satellite camp at C.E. King High School on the east side of Houston. And, I've certainly seen this before where you go onto a football field in Texas, whether it's for a game or a camp or a showcase event, and you're just reminded that you're in the state of Texas. Whether it's Dallas or Houston or San Antonio, Austin, there's football players who are fast and big and long and athletic all over the place. Perfect example is this guy, Van Keith Brown, who walks out onto the field and at the start of the camp, and he had a couple of offers. Kansas State, Cal had offered him, but he wasn't the talk of the camp coming in. In fact, he had multiple teammates from his high school, Katy Jordan, who were more well known than him. And he starts running, and you look at him, he's 6'5", and he's long and he's athletic, and the guy runs like a sub 4.5 40. This is like a Malachi Coleman, who just kind of emerged and walked out of the shadows in Houston one day. And, Evan Cooper and Garrett McGuire are immediately on him. And 2 hours later, he leaves the building with a Nebraska offer. And this guy doesn't have a Houston offer, doesn't have a Texas offer. And it's because there's just so many players in the state of Texas. It's not, he's a seemingly a good character guy, and players just slip through the cracks. So that is the reason that Nebraska wants to invest and spend so much time and energy in Texas, because you can find players like that so much more easily than you can in other parts of the country, just because of the sheer numbers. There's 15 million people in the metro areas of Dallas and Houston together, and they got to both of those areas this week. And for me, it was enjoyable to get out there and see those assistant coaches at work. We got snippets of it in spring practice in the short time that we were able to, as media, able to watch practices. But this was 2.5 hours of those guys interacting with players and putting them through drills and being able to talk to the coaches too during that time. It was insightful and beneficial. And I wrote a little bit about it today, and there'll be some more stories over the next couple weeks, just filling in some of the gaps on things that were said, and talking to Tony White and talking to Satterfield, Rule, McGuire, Cooper, all of the guys that were there. Everybody was there except for Ed Foley, EJ Barthel, and Rob Dvorak, who were back home tending to the home front.
Mitch, real quick before we say goodbye, thanks for fitting us in today. Mitch Sherman with The Athletic. The thought of getting back into Texas is a no-brainer, but Rule's known. Nebraska's not been in Texas for a while. It seems like a big-time emphasis to really work hard to develop relationships and get that Nebraska brand back in Texas. That was kind of part of the mission, wasn't it? I don't want to say reintroduce Nebraska to Texas, but from a recency standpoint, maybe so.
Yeah, there had been kind of a de-emphasis, I think, after Nebraska joined the Big Ten, and that was a mistake, I think, because Nebraska did have history in the state of Texas, and the way that college football was moving even a decade ago with TV networks and the ability to stream games. I don't think it mattered maybe as much as the people in charge at Nebraska thought it did at the time, that they no longer had regular opponents in the state of Texas. And if you had it to do over again, I think you'd look to get there, both in recruiting and in scheduling some out-of-conference games. But, Matt Rule, and not just Matt Rule, but his entire staff. And you see it in the people that he's hired, and not just the on-field coaches, but in people like Susan Elza, the chief of staff for Matt Rule, who has deep roots in the state of Texas, and, others on his support staff and the administrative side who know Texas well. That they cannot emphasize it enough. And I think Nebraska's probably going to get another commitment tonight from the state of Texas with Mario Buford, the brother of Marquise Buford. And if that happens as expected at 7:00, then that's 4 Texans out of 8 in the 2024 class. We'll see if those numbers hold up. I don't know that they're going to sign half of their class from Texas, but 10. Give or take 1 or 2 in every class, I think is somewhere along the lines of being realistic.
Mitch, great stuff. Appreciate the time today. Thanks for joining us, man.
All right. Thanks a lot for having me.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Good stuff from Mitch Sherman. Loaded show today. Get the interviews you want to hear, the commentary on the schedule drop. Hail Varsity Radio podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. The individual segments or the full show can also see the video. Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. Find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, at Herbal Essence for Elijah, at C_Clark_27 for Connor Clark. So 2 questions to get through this segment. 1, have you ever ordered anything off of an infomercial at 2 a.m. As we poke fun at the Flex Protect Plus title? 2, and it's a good poll question out by Sam McEwen, should Nebraska have chosen to protect 3 Big Ten opponents, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, or just the one in Iowa? Which way would you have done it as a Nebraska fan if you made the call? Do you like the one with more opportunity against some of the big dogs, more Penn State, more Michigan, more Ohio State, more USC, more UCLA, or would you rather see Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa, and then sprinkle in some of the newbies and some of the old guard? Listen, Wisconsin is still a bit sentimental just from the Barry Alvarez Nebraska image mold. Minnesota, I can take or leave, but it's been a good road trip. I mean, they've not been great games, but it's been a good experience going up there. So it's an opponent that's always brought on close ball games. I think the one thing you had to protect was Iowa. And if you're Nebraska, and the way I grew up going to all those non-conference games, it would either be a Pac-12 school or somebody of name value. I wanted to see that. So I like what Nebraska did. Keep Iowa and bring everybody else on as you try and make 2023 a springboard for 24 and beyond.
Well, I care less about the 9 game, like, is it going to be Wisconsin, is it going to be Ohio State? I care less about the schedule as a whole and more about what Nebraska can bring to their home schedule. What is Nebraska going to have there? Because you look at 2025, Nebraska's home schedule is Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, Rutgers, UCLA.
That's awesome.
Not bad. Not bad. But then you compare that to 2024, where their home schedule is Indiana, Michigan State, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Like, you also have the non-conference games in 2024 that you have to add to that, which will be, I believe, Louisiana, UTEP, Colorado, and Northern Iowa, all of which are going to be at home. But like, as Nebraska moves forward, if you're going to get a schedule that's your home conference schedule of Indiana, Michigan State, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, you better have some fantastic home non-conference games.
Sure.
Well, I like what Nebraska did too, and that's actually a really good poll question because from a success standpoint and giving yourself that chance, you might rather go Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, but you're already doing away with the division, so might as well mix it up, right? Like, obviously keep Iowa around. I think that's a good idea. It's been, it's a lot of life has been injected into that rivalry now on the Nebraska side with the result last year. But if you're going to get rid of the divisions, all right, let's go play some teams that you normally wouldn't. And also, you're going to see them in a 2 to 3 year period anyway. Mm-hmm. So if you lock in 3 Western Division opponents, I mean, I get it, it's only 3 of 9 conference games, but if you're going to do away with the divisions, I say go all in, and that's what Nebraska did. And I like the fact that you're going to see a lot of teams at home that you normally wouldn't, or you'd have to wait, say, 4 or 5 years in between each matchup to see, such as a Penn State or other teams from the eastern side of the conference.
Nebraska's 2012 schedule sticks out to me because you had Wisconsin at home, you had Penn State at home, and then you got Jerry Kill in Minnesota. That was the last time Nebraska went to a conference title game. You also lost at UCLA. You lost at Ohio State, and you gutted one out at Iowa. That was a tough schedule. The schedule in 2021 was really juicy as well, road and home, and we know how that ended up for Nebraska. But there's always been that great late September non-conference game. I think back to 2014 when Miami came to town. I mean, I want more of those big game, big name matchups, and it's all included now. It's the resort trip, right, where everything's even booze, right, is included. So you get that with the way things have been set up, and for Nebraska to be able to have some of the name teams that you've gotten used to playing as you've moved into the Big Ten, or even have UCLA come to town, that's great. I mean, that's comfortable from a nostalgia standpoint, and you just got to be up for the challenge. And you got to be up for the challenge week in, week out. That's the next shoe to drop. How is it stacked? How is it stacked? You're trading off the gauntlet, theoretically, of Ohio State, Michigan. I mean, that was the big talk in 2021, how it was all just piled on. It was the anti-Sunday of toppings, where it never ever relented.
But think about how fun that 2021 schedule was, though.
It was great.
Nebraska went 3-9.
Game.
But damn, did I have fun just about every single weekend watching that team.
And it was close.
And that's what the future of the Big Ten is going to be. Not just Nebraska. Everyone in the Big Ten is going to have a gauntlet. Everyone in the Big Ten, you have to take it week by week. You have to beat the team that's in front of you. That's how you're going to make a Big Ten title game, because whether you're Indiana or whether you're Ohio State, except for 2024. We talked about this before the show. Ohio State's 2024 schedule, I don't know, maybe book them for a spot in the Big Ten title game. We can get into that here in just a second. But for the most part, there's going to be notable exceptions, but every single year, everyone is going to have a grind if they want to make it to the Big Ten title game. It's not about complaining. There are aspects to how your schedule set up, but it's not going to be easy for anybody moving forward in the Big Ten, especially once you get 10 years down the road here and the Big Ten's 20 or 24 schools, because that's coming.
You're going to earn your TV money. You're going to earn your coaching money, period. You're going to earn your NIL money, theoretically, if it goes the right way. Steven chimes in, do you want the California games to be in November when it's colder here or nicer there? I think you just get it set up so it works to your advantage. You make sure they come here in late November, and you go out there as a return favor.
Whenever you want.
Whenever you want. Be it August, September, October, or November. I don't know. I just wonder if, from a travel standpoint, I mean, there's no good answer for USC, UCLA. Going to Iowa City or Michigan or Nebraska's still not an easy trip, but it's a heck of a lot less problematic than going to Rutgers, Penn State, or even Maryland.
But it's modern
cross country.
It's still modern college football, though. You're going to charter a flight Friday afternoon. Okay, you have to get on your flight 2 hours earlier than if you were going to Iowa City. Okay.
You get to miss another class.
You get to miss one more class. Like, college athletes are ready for this, like especially football teams. I know this is different with baseball and softball and those sports.
Basketball.
Football is still chartering flights. You still get your own flight out there. You get to schedule it whenever it's convenient for you.
Can we charter flights? I mean, I'm all about Boulder and I'm all about going to Minneapolis.
I still think the legendary road trips.
Let's go do a show from the Viper Room.
My roommates road tripped a couple times from Lincoln to San Francisco in like an old Ford Focus. I have no idea how they get out there without breaking down.
Just take a train.
I think a 21-hour road trip to L.A. could be a memory of a lifetime.
Count me
shows
out.
on the road.
Nope.
You can be in studio.
Okay,
Schmidt and I take the car.
Connor's in studio.
I will be going in the air. I will not be driving.
Why don't we just make it Vegas, Midway? Huh?
There you
Vegas?
go.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you one final time. Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. Great email from Rick. Says Sirles is a national talent. Totally agree. Sirles is the best. We love having him on. Busy dude. And we were trading gifts. You know, what's the Nebraska fan reaction to 2025 schedule? And I tweeted to him, or I DM'd him, the Battle of the Bastards for Game of Thrones fans, where
Jon Snow with the sword.
Jon Snow, it's him, it's his Excalibur, and then there's thousands of men on horseback charging at him.
I can tell Connor hasn't seen Game of Thrones based on his reaction. He seems to have no idea what we're talking about. He's got that glazed over look.
What was the blonde gal in Game of Thrones?
Which one?
Well, the
Daenerys.
Yeah, the Dragon Queen.
Yeah, Daenerys.
Yeah, she's you'll tune in for her and you'll stay for the gore. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds about on par.
Yeah.
I'm more of a documentary guy anyway.
I never thought I was Game of Thrones because I like Stairway to Heaven, but their fourth album cover weirds me out, right? A little too Dungeons and Dragons for me, but it was really good. And this is from a non-medieval guy. Meanwhile, you're all about it.
Oh, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, give it all to me.
I'll have to have Elijah just sit me down at a dark room for a couple of hours and just get up to speed on this topic.
Cast a spell on you.
Yeah.
You and I need to go shopping for Elijah, because Elijah was 1,000% correct with his call on Denver winning last night. Not only did Denver win and cover, but it was a backhand.
It was the first time in NBA history a pair has gone off for a 30-point triple-double, two of them.
Which is nuts.
And Jokic is the first ever 30-20-10 finals performance
That's
ever.
Crazy. That's Wilt, that's Kareem, that's Magic, that's Bird. I mean, that's
it's literally
top of the top.
It is. It's Wilt, Kareem, Magic. No, just Wilt, Kareem, and then Jokic 3 times to do it in the playoffs.
That's insane.
30, 20,
3
10
times.
And to have 2 guys triple-double, it's phenomenal.
That Nuggets team.
Those two outdid Denver's starting five.
Mm-hmm. Not even close.
With combined points, with rebounds, with assists.
And
Not even close.
Appreciate moment, too. How about Christian Brown? Where have these minutes been all playoffs?
The pride of Kansas.
Comes in the finals, and he's just all over the place, just flying around, making big plays.
Hey, let's not forget. People forget. He had, I think, 2 good games against the Suns where he did a really, really good job defensively against Kevin Durant.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing in this series.
Yeah, that. I have images of my head of like what happens whenever you guard Kevin Durant, and it's very much darts at a tank, whatever you do to him.
If you get physical with him, he will whimper.
Mm-hmm.
He's so skinny.
Mm-hmm. Still.
And who would think Christian Brown, a rookie out of Kansas, would be able to have this kind of impact in the NBA Finals? I think on betting boards, he's now up to 5th in terms of odds to win the NBA Finals MVP.
That's insane.
That's craziness. But yeah, the Nuggets, they're a wagon. That was a hell of a performance last night. I kind of feel it, and I mentioned yesterday in the show, you felt like the Nuggets, after getting kicked in the ass by Michael Malone following game 2, that they were going to come back and throw a good punch. I wasn't expecting a punch that good.
Reminder to get buckled up. 1 of every 3 fatal crashes in Nebraska involves an alcohol-impaired driver. Why take chances? If you drink, don't drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. Good show today. Thanks for tuning in. Again, the digital, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play for all the podcast segments you want. Tomorrow, Dolman and Brady Oltman's with us.